Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Scherning with American Resiliency. In this video, we're starting a series on regional cross-model overviews, giving you information on local change trends under both conventional warming and tipping point scenarios. I brought out this cross-model approach for the first time in our recent Lifeboats video. There are a lot of interesting places that didn't make the extremely high bar to be counted as a lifeboat. We'll explore other areas with good and with not so good outlooks in this regional series. A little background to get us on the same page. In this figure by the European Union's Copernicus Institute, and I imagine that we're going to have the December data out by the end of this week, we saw some big temperature changes, some big increase in temperature anomaly that began in 2023 and continued through 2024. We're still waiting for the final numbers, but it seems like 2024, we're going to come in pretty close to 1.6C over the pre-industrial climate baseline, according to that information from the European Union. You might recognize that 1.6 is a number, in fact, that's over 1.5C, which was the international intended limit for global warming. So that's not cool, and it's not where the scientific community expected us to be. I shared this article with the community a couple of weeks ago because I think that it's significant when we have figures like Gavin Schmidt, very serious person, well-respected climate scientist, saying that we don't know why this anomaly has occurred. Well, there are a number of pretty well-supported hypotheses for factors that may be contributing to this unexpected warming. Many well-regarded figures are maintaining a position of uncertainty, and that certainly supports my stance. Because since March of 2024, I've maintained it's time to get weird. The evidence is on the table. We are entering a time that's going to continue to challenge our understanding about Earth systems. In this cross-model outlook, the first regional information we're going to focus on is how we expect the American Southwest to change by 2C. Because 1.5C, 1.6C, that's not all that far away from 2C, and the 1.5C projections in the NCA5, our primary source material, have been pretty darn accurate these past 2 weird years. Let's start by taking a look at projected changes to winter lows in the Southwest, because as I've done a fine-tooth comb through the changes projected across America, I really do see more and more that winter changes are the most important summary figure for this region, for telling the story of the Southwest. I know that in previous video, I said I'd do West Coast first. We are starting at the bottom because we're going to keep NCA5 regional breakout structure. We'll work our way up the West Coast from the south. Next time we do one of these regional outbreaks, it'll be for the Pacific Northwest. So here we're looking at the full enchilada, all of figure 11.3 from the NCA5. Every gardener knows that changes to winter lows are very important information regarding what we can grow. In this figure, I think it's really important to see that we're looking at changes to winter lows through a gardener's lens. You can see in the key down here that we're looking at changes to USDA plant hardiness zones on this figure. Let's cut to a snip so we can focus in on our area of interest. So as we consider the complicated changes in these figures, and you'll see that there's a big change from your average plant hardiness zones up to about 2020 to those 2C plant hardiness zones. To help you process it, I want you to keep your eye on the color blue. In the right-hand figure there, where you see blue, that's where we're expecting to maintain typical winter lows below 0 at 2C. You can see there's a lot of change here. I'm particularly interested in this change to the Sierras. I have family there. We can see that's an alarming shrinking of the blue region in the Sierra Mountains of California. Also, points that jump out to me is this complete loss of blue around Flagstaff in those mountains in northern Arizona. We really have to get up to the Wasatch Mountains in Utah, to start to see the mountains bringing some muscle to this fight, holding the cold. And of course, let's look at Colorado. Colorado, you look adorable, and it's important. Colorado, I'm very glad to see you holding all that blue. We want that blue. Where we see that deeper cold, that true mountain cold holding, I think that that's going to mean another month of snowpack held. Another month where the streams can stay cool enough for the fish to make it, especially when they're fry, when they're young and small, the most vulnerable to heat. I think that where we're seeing blue on that map, That's more time where the water is going to bring cool to the land, more time where the water and the land are more in their long-standing relationship. Because let me tell you, as we're considering this figure, there is some very intense change projected for peak stream flow in mountain areas where we lose the blue. In a lot of mountain areas that were snowpack fed, you used to see your peak stream flow in August when it was the hottest time of the year, right? The projections are shifting that peak stream flow to February. Seriously, the loss of snowpack, the shift from snow-fed to rain-fed water cycles, it's going to get really weird. We're talking about profound landscape and ecosystem impacts. Keep the blue on this map in the mountains. It means a lot. It means not just change or stability in what you can grow with that gardener lens. Like I said at the beginning of this little segment here, if you're keeping the blue, it means a more normal water cycle, less intense erosion, and less intense transformation of both the physical landscape and all the living things upon that landscape. And Colorado, I hope you have continued to admire yourself here because a lot of factors check out quite nice for much of Colorado in the 2C projections. You're going to want to check out your state level forecast to get all the details on that. And before anyone gets too alarmed by loss of blue, people may have noticed there's a substantial loss of blue in Nevada, right? I want to say that Nevada, the state level outlook took me by surprise in a number of ways. And while we do see this striking loss of blue for you on the map, we're not talking about the same hydrological situation in your landscape as we are in, say, the Sierra Mountains of California. I will say, looking ahead across some other factors, Northern Nevada is going to pull some nice favors on other factors. And speaking of that, looking towards other factors, as we consider the American Southwest at 2C, let's keep looking at these potential changes to the water cycle, because we all know water is life or death for the Southwest. It's also well established that the region is dealing with a serious long-term drought trend, and that is being dealt with in the context of water laws and regulations that were made in some of the wettest years in recent historical memory. There are a couple of figures from the NCA 5 I think it's important to look at for water projections as we're doing like a regional overview. These figures are in agreement about the big points, but when we're talking about water in this region especially, we want details. Let's start off with figure 210. So zooming in here at the change from where we are now, 1.5C to 2C, it's good to know that in the NCA 5, we do have information further out, but uncertainty is going to increase the further out we go, right? Here we're able to see the shape of the drought, and we see that the shape of the drought trend isn't changing too much as we get to 2C. Maybe the severity of the drought trend will start to reduce a little bit if we look at this very severe drought trend being felt in southern Arizona and southern New Mexico, but still drought. And I was talking about how things are kind of interesting up in Nevada. Look at this statistically significant large area of increased precipitation hitting over Nevada. That's an interesting trend projected there. So in 210, we were sort of looking at the shape of the drought, but now let's look at the scale of the change in inches. Here in figure 4.3 from the NCA 5, we're looking at the difference in inches in projected changes by mid-century, which is going to be about a 2C equivalent. We expect this to be coming faster than the title states here. So let's zoom in on the Southwest. So we can see here the shape of that drought is in general agreement with figure 210, but we get some more detail here and we can see areas where the changes are a little bit larger and a little bit smaller. When we're talking about this palest blue and this palest tan, we're talking about differences of less than half an inch. So small differences in inches, even where we are seeing the drought trend by and large, with a couple of very serious exceptions in California, where we see a more serious loss of precipitation over the Sierras and over the mountains around LA. And I gotta say, that figure, compounded by evidence on many other factors, It puts together for me a powerful message for the people of LA. And as I'm filming this video, my heart is going out to Angelenos because as I'm filming this, those terrible wildfires are burning and they're not contained. We have AR community members reporting in that they're currently evacuating. We have a very serious situation on the ground in LA. LA is already feeling dangerous levels of change. I think it's important for your well being, if you're a person in this region, to accept that you're looking at further accelerated change as we move towards 2C. The changes projected in your future in LA area are unusually dangerous. LA is facing an unusually high rate of change, an unusually high and continued rate of change in these projections. Looking at LA from a defense perspective, the US military considers climate change a primary security threat to the American people and to our national future. The US military considers mass heat death in LA as about the most likely and most serious immediate threat our nation faces from climate change. When I say mass heat death, I mean 10,000 plus fatalities because LA isn't built for the heat that's coming. And I'm not saying this information to scare you. I know you're already in pain. If you're in LA, if you're in the Sierras, these change spots, people are already in pain if they feel it in the earth at all. I think many of you in these areas have a sense in your gut that things are bad, and I want to validate that. I also want to point out something important, that the outlooks in these specific high change areas are unusually bad. The stories that are going to keep coming out of LA, they're going to continue to reflect an experienced reality on the ground of an experienced, particularly high risk location. Understanding that we're facing a threat with differential outcomes across the national landscape and the global landscape is important as we think about climate narratives and where they come from. It's easier to lose hope if you're in a dark place. Of course it is. I think we need to respect the grief and the pain that's going to come out of LA, and that we also need to know that that level of grief and pain, well, real and justified, does not mean the same outcomes are expected across our country. I hope that made sense. And Angelenos, I'm thinking about you today. Going back to the map here for a second, I want to think a little bit about who looks nice. Where are we seeing precipitation increases that may help to even out the water stress on a warming landscape? If we look on the California coast, if we look from about north of Monterey Bay around the Bay Area and up hugging the coast, we've got some areas of real potential stability. We identified snowpack stability in the Wasatch Mountains. Looks like they could get a nice continued snowpack. We see some precipitation increases projected. I think that this is an area of serious interest, as is across Colorado. Colorado, I'm very happy to see so little of your state looking at projected direct drought trend in these figures. Colorado, I'm not saying there's no roughness in the ride ahead. You know that your state is rugged and already accustomed to pretty extreme extremes. If we're talking about a warming landscape, having a little bit more water like this doesn't mean you're going to face an abundance of water. It means the stress isn't going to be as bad. But in a more challenging future, that sort of relative risk, those are the edges we need to hold. So in the Southwest, as you're assessing your area's potential for water stability, I want you to think about where you draw water and where you are in the watershed and how that compares to this information. If you're in the upper Colorado Basin, I might let out half a breath. I might let out a little bit of the tension because there's some encouraging information in this for the upper Colorado Basin. And when we're talking about encouraging information, potential for stability, I hope everyone who's climate aware knows we're talking about relative risk here. And talking about that relative risk, when I say I would not like to be in the lower Colorado Basin, I hope you can take in that the level of water stability concern in the lower Colorado Basin should be high. I've got one more factor I want to explore in this overview regional analysis, and that's heat. And I want to show you where to get to the tool that I'm using. You're going to go to my webpage, AmericanResiliency.org. go to resources and click on our AR visualization that has been created by our amazing AR data visualization team of volunteers. We have all kinds of really cool information on this page that can be panned over to get county level information. Today, we are looking at hot days at 1.5 and 2C. Let's focus in here on the American Southwest. So heat projection is a big story for this region. You're going to want to check out your state level outlook video to get all of the details. In this video, I'm telling the story in brief with the total heat map, which when we look at a number on this map, like 64 days over 95 for the Las Vegas area, that's how many total additional days over 95, your total hot season extension expected. And that's a hard number to find in the NCA 5, which layers information about heat from 95 to 100, 100 to 105, and 105 plus separately. So in this AR resource, the layers are added together. This is your at-a-glance picture of your hot season extension. And for Vegas, we're looking at like 64, 65-day hot season extension. Maricopa County with Phoenix closer to 80. Same thing, unfortunately, down by Tucson, close to an 80-day hot season extension. I want to warn you all, when we're talking about these population centers in Phoenix, I know that you can do a lot more days over 95, no problem. We're talking about another 20 days within that 80-day hot season extension over 105. So we're talking about a serious high-end heat increase and length of hot season projected for the region. And thinking back to my years in Phoenix, 3 more months of hot season, that's probably what, like a February, November hot season? It used to be maybe late April to early October, the hot season. So we're talking about a big change, and people have felt that increase these last 2 years with our summers around 1.5C. For Riverside County, let's look at that here. Riverside County, we're talking about a major increase of days over 95. We're talking about a 2-month increase for Riverside County. And I know that this county is like ridiculously long. So if you live in Riverside County, like some of my friends do, of course, you're figuring like I wanted to figure, that all that heat is out here, far away from the city. But I got to tell you, I looked at it topographically and the heat is right up in the city. When we're talking about the outlook for LA, the LA area, we're talking about an additional 3 days over 105 in a typical summer in a city that is not built for that kind of heat, in a city where a lot of the legacy architecture is not built for air conditioning and is poorly insulated, very difficult to air condition successfully at those temperatures. I want us to note that we're also seeing big heat increases, 40, 50, 55-day heat increases throughout California's Central Valley. Where we see these severe impacts, these severe heat increases, including regular projected heat over 105, long stretches of 105 plus heat, we're talking about major impacts on California agriculture and major impacts on America's agricultural systems. We need to be localizing our food systems in light of these projections. I think that the projections for the Southwest, we grow so much of our healthy food in Arizona and in California, and they're both looking very challenging. We're looking at challenging water outlooks and challenging heat outlooks. There are many places where we could be growing more healthy food for people and take some of the strain off of this system. If we think about America's agricultural communities outside of these beautiful places that grow our salad greens, that grow our fruit, that grow our nut crops, if we think about most of America's agricultural communities, they're growing beans and they're growing corn for the commodities market. A family in these places, they might grow enough calories to feed 300 families, but the only food that family can buy within 100 miles is at the dollar store. And those of you who live in these areas, that's the kind of place where I live, in Poweshiek County, Iowa. Many of us are struggling to eat healthy diets because it can be difficult to access healthy food. Our communities feed the world, but many of us are malnourished or obese because we cannot access food that meets our body's needs. Localized food systems could strengthen our communities in so many ways and strengthen our nation in the face of these major changes that are going to come to our agricultural system and that is going to particularly impact many of our sources of healthy foods. This work of growing healthy foods to meet our needs should be an urgent priority for every community. All right, all right, food rant over. The 2C outlook for the Southwest, it has some very bad parts, right? Some very serious implications. I don't like the outlook for all of Arizona. I have to tell you, at the state level, you can get all the details. It's very rough. For Southern California, excluding some coastal communities, like if you're in a community that has no mountains between you and the sea, like San Diego, don't worry, San Diego. If there's mountains, though, between you and the sea, the outlook is very concerning across Southern California. When we look at some of the big desert population centers, Vegas, Phoenix, Tucson, we're really turning up the heat in these projections. And I'm aware, guys, Phoenix, Tucson, Vegas, I know you're not scared of the heat. If I were you, I would want to know, though, about projected 80 to 60-day hot season increases, looking at 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks over 105. You want to know so that you can get ready. You want to know what you're projected to be up against. We're talking about serious increased power demands and serious increased water demands on the landscape. There are also some pretty large areas that look strong in the American Southwest at 2C. Once you get to the north side of Monterey Bay in California, you see some real potential for long-term stability all along the coast and well inland in many areas. Colorado has many areas, many ecosystems where there's some strong cross-factor stability, and Colorado's bigger cities are by and large looking quite nice as we move towards 2C. So that's some big picture regional understanding of what we're likely to see in the Southwest as we move towards 2C. But if you're a real nerd, you're probably also concerned about tipping points, like the one we appear to have hit. There's been a lot of talk lately, including by me, about amoc collapse, which people often write me and tell me that I don't explain what the heck amoc collapse means very well. So let me try and do better. So we have information about how we understand Earth's history and human history, indicating that there's this circulation system in the Atlantic Ocean. It's like a heat pump driving warmth from the Gulf up to Europe, and it's a salt-based circulation system, which I think is really important to understand the whole thing, is that it's based on salt density, this circulation. Sometimes this pump turns off. Like this is probably one of Earth's emergency off switches. We know the pump exists because there's a lot of evidence that this system went through a phase change before and totally messed up humanity worldwide, like big civilizational collapse worldwide. Anyone who's watching this who happens to also be a Bible nerd probably knows something about the Bronze Age's collapse. That's what happened the last time this heat pump turned off, is everything got so bad that the Torah showed up. So this is serious. And back to science type evidence for this happening now. We've been watching for many months this cold anomaly that's pretty stable over northern Europe. One of the first predicted signs of this pump shutting down would be cold anomalies, stable cold anomalies impacting northern Europe. We're also seeing predicted big weird changes to precipitation patterns near the equator. There has been both drought and flood in South America in ways that are predicted in early stages of amoc collapse, and some greening in the Sahel in Africa. All of these phenomena are connected by paleoclimate evidence. So the question we're looking at right now is what happens to the American Southwest if amoc collapses, if that heat circulation pump in the ocean turns off, which we think that it gets turned off, by the way, if the salt levels, because it's a salt gradient-driven pump, in the ocean get too messed up. Like if you had a lot of melting freshwater glaciers, dumping freshwater, salt-free water into the pump really fast from the north, for example, like what's been happening. So the predicted changes aren't as crazy pants for the Southwest as for many parts of the globe, but they are bad. In terms of heat trends, we would expect a mild cooling trend that would sort of push against that heat trend we were already talking about. But with precipitation, it's notable that across the Southwest, we see this crosshatch pattern, maybe Northern California falling out of the drought trend, but this is a drought trend predicted for the region in the event of amoc collapse. So if you're trying to get ready and build resilience in this beautiful region, you should consider that the tipping point scenario, like add-on, would be a drought multiplier, that there's a serious cross-model drought trend for the American Southwest. So across the Southwest, in a cross-model analysis, it's not going to surprise you if you're a real Southwest person that water is the great crux. In the Southwest, I think we also need to note that there are powerful traditions and powerful seeds, life ways that allow people to grow healthy food under climatic conditions that are likely to spread to new areas in the Southwest. There are areas in the Southwest with an incredible potential for life that have futures that could continue to unfurl in a beautiful way as we approach 2C and move farther into the uncertainty beyond that place. Future can still unfurl. In areas where I see that potential for life, when I look at these figures, I want to tell you a lot of these places I've been able to visit in a couple of trips since summer of 22. To me, these places, by and large, feel strong in the land, not just from the projections. There's a real difference on the ground right now already between higher and lower change areas if you've got an eye for life. You can see the difference between high and low change areas most easily by looking at mature plants. And here's how to look. When you're thinking about, is this really a good area? Look at what's going on with the health and the diversity of mature plants. Look if you can tell if there have been changes in a big way in the last 5 years. If you can find a place where local people get together early in the morning and drink coffee, they're up early, it's more likely they're a land manager. And just listen to what people are saying. That's another good way to tell if you're in a good place. You know, for those of us who love the desert, and I bet there are some of you watching out there who feel about the desert like I do, find it deeply calming to be in the desert, find clarity in the desert. It's very upsetting for us to consider these outlooks around Phoenix, say, around Tucson. With those big hot season increases, we have many reports of big old cactus, century-old cactus, dying of the increased very extreme heat coming to the area already. Our plant and animal friends in these deserts, they're so beautiful and they're powerful and they're fragile. It's terrible to think of them suffering. It's terrible to consider their loss in these projected conditions, which aren't like conditions they've known. The conditions coming to some of the deserts of the American Southwest are not like conditions we've ever faced. They're killing the microbial life in the soil. It's something new and terrible coming to us in places. We can't look away from that terrible future, but it's not the whole story. It's not the story everywhere. It's not the story for all of our desert landscapes. There are desert ecosystems that under these conditions are going to be able to continue to thrive and that are going to probably grow, that are going to expand out. There are places where the traditions in the land will hold, but those traditions around water storage, they have to be practiced. If you're called to this work, you should take it up now. You should acquire seeds. I have had excellent growth and production and preservation now into the 4th and 5th year with heritage seeds from Seed Savers Exchange. I'm putting them up there so that you can have a place worth starting from, but I am certain that there are stronger local sources for local heritage seed in the Southwest. If you're in a place in the desert Southwest where the plants are looking good, you want to dig in, acquire seeds, and consider very deeply what you're doing to treasure water and treasure water in the ground. Of course, there are many landscapes in the Southwest that are not desert landscapes. For many of them, the level of change tells a story that's going to include terrible fire. That has included terrible fire. I know you've already felt it. I know we're seeing terrible fire today. In areas where change is lower, such as along the California coast, north of Monterey Bay, and in much of Colorado, after you think through that water problem, which is the great crux, you got to consider fire. There's a lot that can be done to increase the fire resilience of your home and your community. We have a recent video with Ash, an architect with a focus on climate resilience, which will give you some suggestions for action you could implement today. I'll have that link in the video description. I hope that this regional cross-model outlook helped you visualize the areas of the American Southwest that are facing higher and lower levels of change in the climate projections. As we prepare for our shared future, I hope this information helps you decide where and how to dig in and start building resilience for the harder times that are coming. Many of the biggest population centers of the Southwest are some of America's most vulnerable areas in these projections. Some of the highest change areas that we'll consider as we tour around the country in this regional cross model series. The projected implications to agricultural production in California and Arizona are going to have serious implications for our national food systems. But that doesn't mean there's no position of strength in the region. In fact, some of these areas that look good, they're as strong as they come. No area in the Southwest earned a lifeboat designation because that designation requires a capacity to take in additional population without water stress. But there are select areas in coastal California, Colorado, northern Utah, and northern New Mexico that strike me as having incredible potential for long-term persistence, even in the face of a difficult and uncertain future. When we consider all that we could save, there are so many ecosystems, so many wonderful living things that we could help support through this bottleneck. And now is the time to act on the ground. Let's get ready. Folks, thanks for spending some time learning with me. American Resiliency is a donor-supported nonprofit. We're focused on helping everyone access climate information so we can respond to the changes that are coming. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to the AR community, to our donors, our volunteers, to everyone spreading the word, and to everyone doing the work on the ground. If you'd like to donate, you can find the button for that at the top right corner of our webpage, www.americanresiliency.org. Thanks for getting ready with me, and talk with you again soon.